Is it possible to have an iron pole shot through your skull and survive? And how lucky do you have to be to survive not one, but 2 atomic blasts? Hey everyone, and welcome to Science Illustrated. Today we're going to talk about accidents. Very serious accidents. Today's episode describes the fates of 7 people who were exposed to incredible accidents and miraculously lived to tell their stories. But before we dive in, remember, if you like what we do here on the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to make sure that you don't miss out on a single video. Now, let's get to it. The first story on our list happened in 2006, when British skydiving instructor Michael Holmes was out parachuting in New Zealand. As always, he makes a thorough check of his gear. Even so, the unthinkable happens. His main chute fails. It opens only partly, not enough to ensure that he glides gently down, but enough to send him spinning around as he plummets towards the ground. The incident is recorded by his helmet-mounted camera, and the camera mounted on his buddy's helmet, and his buddy can only look on in terror. Michael falls more than 3,000 meters. As his reserve chute also fails him, he opts finally to shout, "I'm dead, bye," before he hits the ground. Fortunately though, Michael's chute, which failed him, does manage to slow his descent just a little bit, and also he lands in a blackberry bush. Miraculously, he escapes from his unbelievable fall with just a broken ankle, a concussion and a collapsed lung, and more importantly, lives to tell the tale. For the second entry on our list, we'll stay up in the air, in fact, even higher above the ground. Because in January 1972, the 23-year-old stewardess Vesna Vulovic survived a plane crash after a bomb went off inside the aircraft at an altitude of 10 kilometers. When the bomb exploded, passengers and crew were sucked out of the airplane to their deaths. Vesna was apparently wedged behind a catering trolley that prevented her from being sucked out. When the aircraft hit the ground, the other 27 people on board were dead. Vesna was the only survivor, and she was in a bad way. She had a cracked skull, both her legs were broken, and 3 of her spinal vertebrae were crushed. For some time she was paralyzed from the torso down. But after several surgical operations, she actually did manage to walk again. And Vesna Vulovic survived until her death in 2016, aged 66. Now it's time to go even further back in time. More specifically, back to the 13th of September 1848 in Vermont in the United States. A 25-year-old railway worker, Phineas Gage, was clearing bedrock in preparations for laying railway track. To remove bedrock, they drilled a hole into the rock and then used long iron rods to push explosives down the hole before lighting the fuse and blasting the rock away. It is believed that what happened that day was that as Phineas Gage pushed explosives down the hole, the iron rod scraped against the rock, igniting a spark. The spark ignited the explosives, and the iron rod, which was more than a meter long, shot up into the air. As it shot up, Phineas was hit right below his left eye, and the rod continued directly through his skull. Having laid unconscious for a few minutes, Phineas finally came to and was quickly transported into town. Despite having a long iron rod shot right through his head, Phineas Gage survived. He did experience some complications though. Not only did he lose his left eye, but the accident also changed his personality. Damage to his brain meant that he lost his inhibitions, a condition typical for people who have a damaged frontal lobe. He became erratic, began to swear a lot, and make unseemly comments. Phineas Gage died 12 years after the accident, and in 1860, 7 years after his death, his body was exhumed. His skeleton and the famous iron rod are now exhibited at Harvard Medical School. Now, back to the present, or at least almost. In the year 2008, a British factory worker named Matthew Lowe had a terrible accident. Matthew was working at a factory where machinery was used to haul large, heavy steel beams into the factory. What happened here was that Matthew's work trousers got jammed in the machinery, which then began to pull him in. There was nothing he could do to escape, and he was pulled into the machine through a small hole that was not much larger than, say, a CD storage box. He broke his back and one arm, his pelvis and several ribs were crushed, and his stomach and intestines were ruptured before the machine finally spat him out on the other side. 6 surgical procedures were required to put Matthew's mangled body back together. Luckily, he survived that ordeal too, and today Matthew has no permanent serious injury except the fact that his right arm is not as strong as it was before the accident. Being struck by lightning can be fatal. Being struck by lightning twice in succession is apparently not as fatal. At least it wasn't for 37-year-old American Casey Wagner, who was struck by lightning twice in May 2013 at St. Joe, Texas. During a violent thunderstorm, Casey took shelter under a tree, which is hardly the best thing to do during an electric storm. He was struck by a lightning that ran through him to earth. He fell to his knees, and shortly after, he was struck by lightning once more. Casey Wagner was then rushed to the nearest hospital, but the amazing thing was that after receiving only brief treatment, he was discharged with no serious injuries. Now, number 6 on our list has to be described as a very unlucky guy. Or perhaps a very lucky guy, depending on how you look at it. Japanese Tsutomu Yamaguchi managed to survive not 1, but 2 atomic blasts. Tsutomu Yamaguchi lived in Nagasaki, but was in Hiroshima on business the day the Americans dropped the first atom bomb on Japan. He suffered serious burns and his eardrums were perforated. He did survive though, and succeeded in escaping the town of Hiroshima through a devastated landscape strewn with the dead and injured. He got home to Nagasaki and was explaining what had happened in Hiroshima when the second atomic bomb exploded over, well, you guessed it, Nagasaki. But Tsutomu survived once again. He suffered radiation sickness, but he recovered and lived a normal life until his death in 2010. Now for the 7th and final entry on our list, and this too is about radiation. Because on the 13th of July 1978, a Russian engineer named Anatoly Piekarski became the only person ever to have been shot through the head by a particle accelerator. At the time, Anatoly Piekarski was working at the largest particle accelerator in the Soviet Union, and on that day he was called in to examine a defective accelerator tube. When he examined the machine, he did not realize that some of its safety mechanisms had been deactivated, which meant that the accelerator was operating at full power when he stuck his head inside it. A proton beam shot directly into the back of his head and through his face, right by his left nostril. He felt no pain, but described the experience as a strike of light brighter than 1,000 suns. The dose of radiation that shot through his head was hundreds of times higher than the dose needed to kill a person, so the doctors were sure that he wouldn't make it. They gave him only a few days to live and decided to study how he died. But Anatoly Piekarski did not die. The beam had burned a hole through his brain and the left side of his face swelled, but nothing more than that. At least in the immediate aftermath. In subsequent years, he did suffer the side effects of this massive radiation. He became deaf in his left ear and the left side of his face was completely paralyzed, and he began to suffer epileptic fits. The amazing thing is that the left side of his face, which was hit by radiation, does not seem to age as much as the right side. And when he frowns, the left side is completely free of wrinkles. Those were the 7 stories of people who suffered terrible accidents but lived to tell the tale. There are more accounts like these out there, but these were the 7 we chose to go with today. What about you? Have you ever been in a position to think, man, that was a really close call? Also, if you have any suggestions for topics you would like us to take a look at in future videos, don't hesitate to write a comment in the comment section. I really do hope you liked the video. If you did, throw us a like and of course, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to follow the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.